here we are. Look at all of these faces here. It's so exciting. Welcome everybody to Good Gut Live. We're very excited to be here with you. If you're watching this, you're seeing a lot more faces than usual. This isn't even all of the team at Married to Health, but it's most, and we're very excited to be here. As many of you may know, my name is James Marin. I'm an integrative registered dietitian, environmental nutritionist, one of the co-founders of Married to Health.
I'm Deli Marin, integrative gut health dietitian, also one of the co-founders of Married to Health. And this is an exciting topic. We're excited to be joined by our team. You might be familiar with some of their faces. If not, we're excited for them to have themselves introduce themselves to you. First up, we have Katie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Chakos. I'm a licensed registered dietitian and PhD candidate, and I focus on women's health and cancer risk, cancer treatment, and survivorship.
I can go next. Okay, thank you. My name is Laura. I'm also known as the Emotional RD. I focus on women's health, nervous system, and I'm also registered dietitian licensed here in Georgia, Atlanta.
Cool. And then I'm Damaris Hunger. I'm also one of the dietitians on the team. I'm also a student of naturopathic medicine, and I love working with kids, with adults that have chronic diseases, lifestyle-related diseases. I always see hope in these pictures, so I want to help my patients find that.
Beautiful. And again, yes, our topic is very, very exciting. As always, it's very interesting, especially to us dietitian and food nerds, where we're talking about just, of course, gut health. There's always a gut health element, but really talking about ultra processed foods, as it seems everyone's talking about it. And it's in the news because of a specific Time article. So the Time article has been newly titled, "What If Ultra Processed Foods?" And I'll go ahead and share what this is looking at here. There we go. Dahlia's helping me out here. Okay. Well, this is one. So this was why one dietitian is speaking up for ultra processed foods. That is the new title of this article. And so really it is a dietitian saying, and we'll get into this, but really I'll start off by saying we're going to discuss this. We're going to first, I think, define ultra processed foods and get into like what is a processed food, what is this actually, and then we'll discuss this. But this is really the article that started all this discussion, which first and foremost I'll say is great. We need more discussion on food. We need more mainstream outlets discussing processed food and nutrition, and it's great to see a dietitian or even the word dietitian in the title. And I think we all have to then decide on, is all publicity good publicity when it comes to a dietitian? So we'll see. That's TBD for sure. So, okay. So with that, I think what I want to do is then really discuss, and everyone can kind of chime in on processed foods. Now, from the research and scientifically, we're looking at the NOVA system of defining processed foods. And actually, I will pull up another graphic, but really not all processed foods are the same. So there's actually 4 categories. There's groups of processed foods. And I want to see if I can share this. Here we go. And really, this is kind of a blurry, so I apologize for those watching, and for those listening. There's group 1, group 2, and group 3, group 4 when it comes to processed foods. And so you have group 1, which is unprocessed, minimally processed food. So another term for this, I remember learning about this in undergrad, is like value added foods, where it's like, oh, they took carrots and chopped them and washed them for you, and now they're in a bag, right? I'm sure we've all purchased carrots like that. That's technically a processed food, but I wouldn't say it's in the same category as Oreos, right? So this is why we have different groups. So group 1, I think we can all agree, and anyone can chime in, is like, eat these foods, right? When we're talking about group 1 processed foods, eat these foods. Would we all kind of agree with that, or?
Yeah. And, I think it's interesting to go through the spectrum before we kind of pick them apart, because even the word process gets people going. So I think to even hear that any type of processing, someone washing it for you is considered processing. So all of our food, really, unless you're the one pulling it out of the ground yourself, or you grew the food yourself, all of our food in some way, shape, or form is processed. So we want to really drive that point home that, people need to be mindful when they're really going up in arms about certain terminology because there is very much a spectrum. So first up, yes, we do have those processed foods. And then we have things like processed culinary ingredients. So a little bit more processing to this because you're not going to go find a bottle of olive oil growing on a bush, right? You do need to take the olives, wash them, sort them, and then press them, deseed them, and then press them in order to extract that oil. So we're still cooking with it. There hasn't been anything necessarily added, but rather there's maybe been something removed in order to produce that ingredient or produce that food product. The same could be said for something like maple syrup, right? You're still tapping a maple tree, you're extracting the syrup from it. It's not necessarily added and adulterated, but we're not eating the whole maple tree when we're having maple syrup. So that would be category 2. So a little bit more of a processing to that.
And then group 3 would be almost a combination of group 1 and group 2. And actually, my favorite food and a topic we're going to discuss in the near future is in group 3 of processed foods. It's fermented foods. So kimchi and sauerkraut technically fall in group 3 when it comes to processing. So from 1, 2, and 3, there are super healthy foods here, especially when we're talking about group 3 containing technically in the category of fermented food. So if you're buying fermented food in a jar, it's technically a processed food. It's in group 3. And so that's an example of a group 3 processed food, but it'll include other things like beer. Obviously, beer is not just, oh, here's beer. It's a process to make beer from hops and fermenting and distilling. And when you're making other alcohols and wines and cheeses and breads. And so that's where kind of group 3 comes in. I think group 4 is where all the controversy comes in. This is where all the media buzz starts coming into it. Is group 4. Do you want to?
And the title of the article did specifically say, ultra processed foods. It states it's talking about these ultra processed foods, and it's talking about why one dietitian was speaking up for ultra processed foods. But we feel like it's important to really educate on what these ultra processed foods are. And really, ultra processed foods they have additional hyper refined ingredients added. So you're going to find things such as ultra processed sugars, where it went through multiple steps of processing in order to get that. You have things like preservatives, stabilizers, bulking agents, foaming agents, gelling agents. These ingredients have been through quite a bit of processing, quite a bit of synthesizing. A large amount of these ingredients you would not find naturally occurring. Usually they are being manufactured in some way, shape, or form. So then our question as dietitians, you have 5 dietitians sitting here before you, is we all want to kind of share our opinion on this spectrum and where some of the opinions in this article came from, our take on these, and just real life of where do these things fit in our lives as those who have our particular niches, our professional opinions, our education. So now that we've talked about kind of what they are, we'd love to hear your initial takes when you read the article. We all had a chance to read it, all had a chance to process it on our own. So we'd love to hear your takes on it.
I can start. I think my initial take or thought after reading this article was about context. I think oftentimes, and it's happens a lot in media where the gray is sort of taken out. And I know in our team of dietitians, we love the gray. We love talking about that space where context really matters. And there are certain foods that fall into group 3, group 4, that in certain contexts can be immensely beneficial. And then maybe in other contexts, they're not necessarily needed. I think especially in my space within the area of cancer and oncology and nutrition, that gray area becomes really evident, especially when it comes to people during cancer treatment and they're having intense fatigue and they can't go to the grocery store. They can't even get into the kitchen to cook really beautiful whole food meals that their cancer dietitian was telling them about. And that's where some of these nutritional shakes or bars or other products that would otherwise, in a different context, not necessarily be recommended, but in this particular instance, in this particular point in time for them, might be an essential part of their care. And then once the fatigue has sort of decreased, they can get back into the kitchen and make those beautiful meals for themselves. So I think for me, that really stuck out, that it's not a one size fits all in any means. And I think that's overall a big message as dietitians. It's never one size fits all.
Yeah.
That's so important, because I think what, if I could just add to that, this article really was, I think, appealing to a majority of Americans. I know that this dietitian made her commentary based on this book, Ultra Processed People, that came out, in which the author did that experiment on himself. So an N of one, right? But for an entire month, he ate a majority of ultra processed foods. And I don't have exact percentages, but we can say a majority is more than 50%. And so I think just in general populations, specific diseases or conditions aside, right, we're not assuming anyone has IBS or anyone has cancer, anyone has any of these other things going on, just how are they going to affect one as a whole? And I thought it was interesting. He had very specific data to present. He had biomarkers that he presented before and after eating a majority of ultra processed foods. He had an MRI. He had all of these different data points to measure inflammatory markers, to measure his blood lipids, to measure his blood sugar and his cholesterol. Which is a blood lipid, but, blood pressure, things like that. And so, I do find that interesting that there are many studies to back up really the findings of, again, that experiment, that N of one, versus where, yes, absolutely, as dietitians, we want to be mindful of socioeconomic backgrounds of people, limitations that people have, all while, I think, continuing to try to work for a better cause, right? For the greater good of our society. Because we know that ultra processed foods are now the norm and not the exception any longer. We know a majority of Americans are consuming a majority of their calories from ultra processed foods. And so I feel like as dietitians, knowing the data, knowing the science behind it, I personally, and I'm not going to speak for the whole group, I don't feel like we need to be advocates for something that's already out there that we know has so much data behind the ill effects that it can bring. But we can be advocating for things like the Farm Bill, which influences how to lower costs for whole foods. We know, what is it, less than 2% of the Farm Bill goes towards funding fruits and vegetables. So as, nutrition education specialists, it's interesting, to see, yes, of course, we want people to have a psychologically healthy relationship with food. I eat ultra processed foods, absolutely, from time to time. But I don't feel the need to be a spokesperson for them personally.
And to your point, because Katie, you're so sweet, and I love you, because I mean, if the article's written of like, here's how a variety of foods fit into medical nutrition therapy, then yeah, I mean, because I mean, there's even like organic, non-GMO health shakes that would technically be ultra processed or fall into that category, right? And or we're talking about like enteral tube feeding and all, like, of course, we need all of that. But the article, and I think this is why it's so controversial, because the article's more geared towards the general American population. It's like, okay, so like, yeah. And so to that point, and then Dahlia, basically what she said was, if it's for the general population, we're not talking about medical nutrition therapy. We're not talking about special, special diets in hospital settings or even outpatient settings. We're talking about the general American. The general American is morbidly obese. We're now approaching 50+% diabetic. We're having increase in autoimmune. We're seeing an increase in last it was like 1 in 8, but really the data is more like almost approaching 1 in 6 with some type of GI issue or dysbiosis, and the stats keep going up. And it's like, okay, what in the last 100 years has changed? And there's a lot, but there's also a significant amount of data to point to what we're eating. We all eat, 3 times a day, some less, some more. And it's like, okay, what has happened to our food? And when we do look at the data, we are seeing from the time the seed is planted to the time it's on the dinner table, it has changed drastically in the last 100 years. And there is a significant piece of that puzzle leading towards ultra processing, right? So whether that is, sugar and fat and protein, the analogy we always given is, what's wrong with cocaine, right? Why don't we all have some cocaine? And I know this is very extreme, I know, but the coca plant is a plant. Like it's coming from a plant. Cocaine's plant-based. Like, let's all just enjoy some cocaine. Well, because we know, as we hyper refine or ultra process, as we add synthetic chemicals or remove certain chemicals, we can drastically change the biochemistry of a plant. The coca plant is still used in indigenous populations. They eat the whole leaf. I think they do some other minor processing to it, but they can eat it. They get energy. But if you take that coca leaf and you turn it into cocaine, it's now, I don't know what schedule it is, but the FBI and our government isn't too happy with it. We know it destroys communities because it's so toxic and it's so addictive, and it completely changes the coca plant. I know it's a very extreme example,
and I don't even want to say this out loud. Again, it's not the same. So I don't want to make it seem like it is, but it's context. And like Katie said, it's all about the gray. It's all about the frequency as well. So
totally,
that's where kind of my eyes read in this article of majority versus occasional, and really defining that process versus ultra process. But Laura and Damaris, we'd love to hear from you as well. We've heard from our differing perspectives.
I can go next. For me, when I was reading the article, what really kind of came across was feeling a little bit of sadness for the situation that we're living in as a society. Of like me feeling like, no, like ultra processing. I agree with this doctor, like he has all of the stats and all of the things. And then as I was reading, and then they started talking about the marginalized people and socioeconomics, and then remembering that I've had patients where I give them all of the recommendations and they don't have the money. They only have $20 to spend for the whole week. Why do you spend your money for $20 for the whole week in a way when you already have so many health issues that are perhaps contributing even more to your inflammation, right? And so like kind of coming back to what Katie said about context, but also like, where are you in your health journey? If you're already like, if your body's already super taxed on edge, like lots of inflammation, lots of health issues, and then on top of that, that's the only thing you can afford, then I think we have like a topic about policies, politicians, big pharma, food industry. I mean, it's like it just really touches on a deeper, much deeper topic than just the fact of, hey, don't eat ultra processed foods. And yeah, it's just like, again, it's like not everything processed is in the same category. And at the end, I feel like also there's ways somehow, like connecting with community, connecting with groups that are doing amazing stuff. If you really wanted to get your health right, I've met people that didn't have money and they just somehow were able to kind of work with a local farm and figured it out in a way that was like, okay, let me figure this out, right? Because it also comes back to this like mentality of victimhood, a little bit of like, oh, I'm left with whatever there is. And it's like, I think we need to also take responsibility for our health in a way. So there's just too many factors, too many things. It's very complicated. It's a very controversial topic. It's really hard to take on a hard, fixated perspective, because again, it's in the gray. It can't be forever, because we know with data that it will affect your health. And it makes sense. When we're eating so much processed, ultra processed, we're just strapping away all of the nutrition, and we're left with carbs pretty much. And then they just add sugar, fat, and whatever else. And so then it's lacking all of the fat soluble vitamins, all the minerals, not to mention the soil. James, I know you love this topic.
It's a dense topic. It's
very
big.
dense.
It seems easy of like, oh, ultra processed food, but then as you dive deeper and you really get to some of these roots, it is drastically connected, and really you see, oh, everything's integrated, and you're seeing, oh yeah, the politics and the policies and just everything, economics, and really that's where I have to say, yeah, if you're listening to this and watching this and some of these big topics, you're like, wow, what can I do? It does go to kind of the sense of, yeah, how did we get here? And I like this. I like your perspective, Laura, of like, yeah, it kind of makes you look around and go, wow, how did all this happen? And it's not so easy to just say, or I mean, you could say this, and you have to make a decision. Each of us individually have to make a decision. Are we just at the whim of whatever's happening? So we'll just let the people keep making decisions, and if food prices go higher and more processed food are there, and we're just gonna, okay, deal with it? Or can we actually make a change and go, I don't want that. I'm gonna go the other direction. Say, I want a society where the default is healthy, organic, locally grown, fresh produce, right? Why isn't it that we have a society where it's easier to get regenerative, organic? I mean, think of like Air One, the fanciest, most beautiful, most delicious, most healthy food. Why isn't that cheaper by default, right?
Ooh.
And so that's a whole rabbit hole in and of itself. But these are questions to ask and go, is this by design? My perspective, I'm going to say my my point of view is yes. And it's by design because economically it makes the most money for a certain amount of companies. This is not a mistake. This is not by accident. This is not happenstance. This is not a byproduct of the Industrial Revolution. This is the byproduct of the revolution of greed, where a certain handful of companies are essentially, as they're stripping away nutrients from food, they're stripping profits from a lot of different people and monopolizing industries. This is where it gets really deep really quickly. And so that's a whole nother area, but that's my 2 cents on that. And just to kind of, comment there. But Damaris, were you gonna?
Yeah. I echo all of what you are saying, but I do want to add, like, in our modern society that has changed so drastically, where people's jobs are different, people's daily routines are different, there is a time and a place for certain things, but there is not enough education to educate the public. Okay, this ultra processed food could fit in this many times in a week or a month. And this ultra processed food really is detrimental when it becomes my daily food. Example, thinking about my populations that I like to work with, kids and families or adults with chronic diseases. For example, kids, today's kids, the kids I work with many times are in like after school programs, which is really excellent, but the parents are also working. So realistically, for many of these families, for the parents to be cooking meals every single day for every meal is incredibly difficult. That being said, you could choose something considered an ultra processed food by definition, like an applesauce or canned beans or like whole grain pasta or bean pasta that is transformed, that is still ultra processed. It's quicker to make, but has many less negative effects. Or another example, someone who's trying to reverse heart disease or for example, there's ultra-processed meat, and then there's ultra-processed plant-based meat. And ultra-processed meat is a carcinogen, and ultra-processed plant-based meat, although there's a lot of conflict over that as well, will have more fiber and should not be carcinogenic. So there are pros and cons. I think the real issue is the education. And where do people get their education? Is the label. And the label is very deceiving many times. When it means green, it doesn't mean healthy always. Where do they get their education? Social media. Who's paying for the ads? So these are things to consider, and that's why sometimes we need help. So I really try to encourage my patients, like, okay, let's learn to read the labels. This is really important. What you see on the front is not what's happening in the back. And also, something else to consider is we take patients around the world, and some countries are not the same as other countries. It's very unfortunate that in the USA we have additives in ultra-processed foods that are very detrimental, whereas other countries don't have that situation, even with kids, food coloring, or where there are negative consequences, but in other countries, food coloring is completely illegal. So these are things that need to be brought forward. And more education, I think, needs to happen. I think about athletes. Sometimes they need an ultra-processed food. They need an energy compact food, but there are healthier options than others. So this is an interesting conversation for sure.
Thank you for watching this. We hope you know by now, Married to Health really does everything we do coming from a need in our community, a need from our patients, a need from being dietitians for over a decade, from running our own private practice. And we continued that when we formulated Gut Nurture. So if you didn't know, Dahlia Marin, RDN, LD, CGN formulated Gut Nurture along with Complement. We truly believe it is a great complement for your gut health journey. Why is that? Well, it's low histamine, it's low FODMAP, it's organic, even the package is compostable. We really designed it with the patient in mind that is wanting to eat more plants, that needs to eat more plants, but is struggling to eat more plants. This is that bridge. We also designed it for the person who's just like, I want to boost my gut, I want to feel really good, I want to help with the structure, function, and population of the gut. This is unlike anything that's really out there in that as it's focused on being a prebiotic, not really a probiotic. So the idea here, you can think of Gut Nurture as compost for your gut ecosystem. It's not trying to force seeds and the probiotics in, it's trying to create a beautiful environment and a beautiful foundation. So any seeds you get from the fermented foods you're eating, from your environment, from the beautiful habits you're building, whether you're working with us or not, they are going to fall on this beautiful, healthy soil with this beautiful, healthy compost and create a lush, beautiful ecosystem and garden, creating an abundance of fruit and postbiotics that are going to keep you healthy and thriving. So click down below, learn more about Gut Nurture, and we'll continue with the episode.
And I'm glad we're having it because really it's hard to even educate on it because there's no consensus. So even us as dietitians, this is all just our opinions right now because there really is no recommendation. I know that in November of the 2025 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee is expected to release a report on ultra processed foods. So we'll have that to look forward to kind of say, okay, they're accumulating the data that we currently have on ultra processed foods and will hopefully give us some guidance. Although even with that, we do need to also be discerning and kind of use a wise perspective because even the US Dietary Guidelines Committee receives influence and funding from big food, if you will. So that's a whole nother element that we don't even have standards right now to go off of. Certain societies, you know, the American Cancer Society, the American Diabetes Association, we have some of these large organizations, the American Academy of Pediatrics, will provide guidelines on how much added and refined sugar or saturated fat is recommended per day, usually for their population, whether that's, you know, someone with cancer, someone with diabetes, a child. But that's really just their group's consensus. So they're keeping their population in mind. So I'm curious to read this report coming out next year just to see if it has kind of just the American population in mind. And usually they do categorize it adult versus child, you know, they'll usually put male versus female. But I'm curious to kind of see what their conclusion is, what their assessment is, where this is. What we do have currently are the dietary guidelines for Americans. Those come out every 4 or 5 years, I think 5 years, that those are coming out. And we know what we already have. We know that we're seeing, these diseases unfortunately are continuing to rise year after year. And that's not consistent with what the guidelines are recommending. The guidelines do recommend whole grains. They do recommend fruits and vegetables. They do recommend minimizing sugar sweetened beverages. So I think as dietitians, that is a partial guideline that we do have and we do have to follow. And again, though there's no specific call out or call to action for ultra processed foods in there certainly is so much room for us to be advocating for what we do know is health promoting and is disease reversing or disease altering or disease preventive.
I think that's a really great point, Dahlia, to make as well. And even within researchers, and this happens in our labs, we love to pick apart different systems. Is this the right questionnaire? Is that the right eating index to use? So even though, yes, we have this NOVA system that lists out the different types of processed foods, we also have the healthy eating index. We have so many other indexes that can help us determine the level of nutrition within certain foods, and they might not all play well together. I think that's an important distinction too, is that breakdown of this is an emerging science, but we have what we currently have with the guidelines that tell us how to build a balanced plate, how to increase our whole grains, increase our fiber in this ever-changing landscape that we have, especially with things like colorectal cancer, is becoming very prominent at younger and younger ages. And why is that? Processed meats being a really big, in my opinion, a really big contributor to that, because that is so heavily linked with colorectal cancer. Hot dogs, salamis, bacon, all of those foods that are common to see at diners or restaurants or just in our home kitchens, and really trying to decrease those foods that we do know have a really strong link already. And how do we help support people to make those changes without having to put so much food in only 4 different categories?
I love that, Katie. I totally agree because yeah, someone could take what I said of like, hey, group 3 processed foods are good, fermented foods, and then like, oh, beer, okay, wine, like, and then go crazy with it, right? Well, it's like, well, obviously, yeah, beer is not as health promoting as kimchi, right? It's like very different. So yeah, I totally agree where there's so many, different metrics, and we kind of have to put them all together and analyze them, and that's where PhDs come in and do all these wonderful studies, and they do these really well designed studies, and we can look at the data a little bit better. So it's really
and it seems like Laura has something to.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that also, that it's very easy to put everything under an umbrella, and it just really depends many times, even with processed foods. Where is it coming from? What are the company doing to like create these processes? Because even if there's a process, like we were saying at the beginning, product, it may be still having like a process that is not as bad. Or maybe there are animals that they're using, they're being fed, they're being out in the sun, all of the things. Same with the plants. Maybe they have like a good soil that have like rich minerals and are taking all of the things that they need, right? So it's really hard to put everything under one umbrella of like, well, this has been linked to cancer. Yes, but like then the question would be, well, what did you use in your research? What type of foods? And they don't really give that much of that information, right? Like it's very tricky, the whole scientific evidence area, because, and Katie, you could probably talk about this, we are dealing with humans have lots of opinions, and what Katie may see in the stethoscope or whatever you call it, I can't even think of the word, may be different from the next person. The other person may not see the same thing. and then they come up with like a whole like average and thing. But again, it's really difficult to do what we're doing with science and having all the time having to be like, it has to be science backed. It has to be science backed, because science also has its issues. That's the truth to me, in my opinion. Again, my humble opinion, I think that science sometimes also kind of makes mistakes. And that's why we have to take everything with a grain and context and ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also, oh, sorry, Damaris. I was going to say, I think it's also important, the distinction between the definitions within a research perspective, which is what us as healthcare practitioners do, but then also what the layman terms mean. And ultra processed foods out on the street don't necessarily mean bread from the grocery store. They mean something very different. And so, or whole wheat bread might be considered an ultra processed food on whatever list, but that's not what we would classify for that to mean, versus like a piece of candy or a gummy bear. And so I think that's where we also have to play both sides on, okay, what does my patient think an ultra processed food is, and how do I guide them to the right directions when they are at the store and they're looking at the shelf, because that's what they have access to. So I think that's also an important difference to make.
Yeah, one other thing I do want to mention is it's always important to figure out, for you personally, for people you're working with, whatever, what is your goal? Because it can be very different. For some people, it is to like meet a deficiency. For some people, it is to perform really well. For other people, it is to lose weight. For other people, it is to just be nourished. And for all of these different populations, ultra-processed foods have different roles. And so I think that's something else to consider. Is your goal to prevent disease or not? Which ideal it should be. And we want to take a look at all of these and bring them together, and then, see how can we best move forward from here.
And I feel like as dietitians, we're giving our own version of informed consent when we're talking about nutrition with people. And so it's, one thing to say, hey, you are living on a limited income, and this is maybe how we can budget and help you achieve these things. And I have worked with an underserved population in the past. I worked with families who were mainly receiving WIC and SNAP and very much living on a subsidized life. And so it's not something I'm unfamiliar with to, really help somebody understand their resources, but also provide them that informed consent of, this is what's consistent with the data, right? This is more or less from what we know right now, and that may change, how much added and refined and ultra processed sugar is recommended for your children at this time, or for you as an adult at this time. And so, that's where I think I had a little bit of a differing opinion from the article, rather than just saying, hey, I don't want you to feel bad about your diet, so I'm just going to tell you that eating ultra processed foods for a majority of your diet is fine, because I don't want you to feel bad about it. I feel like that's, as dietitians, we have that ethical responsibility to say, absolutely, let's work with your resources. Maybe let's even stretch your resources a little bit more. This is how you can use your WIC funds and maybe not have the 5 gallons of juice, or instead of buying fruit juice, perhaps we can get tomato juice and make soups out of it. These are the cereals with the least added and refined sugars that are still part of the WIC program and the WIC package, rather than just saying, hey, I don't want you to feel bad that you have WIC, so just buy whatever. Buy whatever is approved by WIC, no matter how much added and refined sugar it has, no matter how many emulsifiers are added to it, how much saturated fat is there. Just, you do you. Eat enough calories. I just feel like we have more of an education, we have more of a platform to stand on than to just justify it in that way. We can continue to try to advocate for policy change, reform in our food system. We can continue to try to educate people, so that way they're asking these questions and saying, hey, because I also often had patients ask me that, why are these foods even part of WIC if they are not in line with the guidelines for my children? If WIC is a program for women, infants, and children, and these are the guidelines that are set forth for children, why doesn't it match up? And I loved having those conversations with my patients. And we would get into the farm bill and we would get into lobbying and we would get into all of these different things. And I just felt like as a dietitian, that is what I'm there for, to really give both sides of the opinion. Of course, you cannot, at the end of the day, force your beliefs on anyone, but I'm all about informed consent, no matter what context you're speaking about it in. And so if we have that opportunity to educate people on, hey, this is how it can promote your health, this is how it can affect your health now and in the future, I feel like we have that responsibility to do so.
I'll add to that. And I see questions coming in, so we want to answer some questions as well. But I see also, one, an addictive factor to this, and two, to add to what Dahlia is saying, that education responsibility, right? Because it's way easier and I guess more appealing, which kind of appeals to that addictive nature of some of these foods, to grab a bag of chips versus a bag of dried beans, right? Like it's way easier, it's satisfying. I was that kid growing up in a predominantly Mexican American community, a lower socioeconomic status, and I would go to the corner store and grab the 99 cent, or no, back then, I sound like an old person going, back in my day, there was a deal where you can get like the little, I mean, there are all these like little treats, like the little Debbie things, and they're 25 cents. So if you had $1, you can get 4 little treats. Now, for the same dollar, I could get a huge bag of chickpeas and pinto beans. As you know, a junior high or even like 6th grader, 5th grader, with my dollar, am I going to go, oh, a bag of beans? Go home, Mom, can we make beans for the whole week? And I have all this great protein and fiber. Or am I going to go for the little Debbie snack cakes, multiply it by 4? I got 4 of them for $1. I'm doing the snack cake, right? And so as the parent, you're hoping the mother and father is then going to that store and buying the bag of beans, and you can feed your family for the week, depending how big the family is, with those beans. But is that happening? And in with that experience with WIC, it wasn't. I mean, some were, don't get me wrong, but many didn't know. Oh wow, I could get that whole bag. And did you know you can even get it organic? Whoa, it covers organic. So there's a lot of that missed education, right? That piece is huge. And that's why I do feel very strongly on this. That's where us as dietitians, we are that front line of education. We are kind of that missing piece of that education to go, no, here, check this out. Look what this dollar can do. That's even, I would say, per serving cheaper than a lot of these ultra processed foods. And that's why when the dietitian writing this article made that kind of statement, she made it multiple times of like, the lower socioeconomic people need this food. It's like, well, there's dry grains and dry beans, and there's so much there that's even cheaper, I would argue. And really the data is there, the statistics are there to say it's cheaper. Can you really argue that anymore? And that's hard. And I'll even to point that out a little bit further, I'll show you, is Time changed the title of the article. And so just to be fully transparent and make everyone aware, and I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit more. Originally, the article was, what if ultra processed foods aren't as bad as you think? So clearly you have to guess, and we can look into this. I haven't looked into this, but this happens all the time. Who paid time for this article, right? We know media outlets have sponsors. They have, big marketing departments to get funding to continue to be a profitable organization. And then I think once they saw a lot of the backlash, it quickly turned to, wait, here it is. Hold on. Or let's see. Oh, wait a minute. It was a dietitian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, then they changed it to why one dietitian is.
Where was that?
Is
Sorry,
ultra processed foods aren't as speaking
here we go.
For ultra processed foods.
Right. So to come back to this one.
So I think when people were frustrated with Times for printing this article, then they were like, wait, this isn't on our this isn't our opinion, it's this one dietitian's opinion, which was interesting as a dietitian that week. It was like, oh man, we're getting slammed this week.
Right. But you see that kind of kick in the can of like, whoa, it's the dietitians, right? And then they're not wrong. But at the same time, like, where'd this article come from? Because if you're a dietitian, and for those that aren't aware, when you're a dietitian or health professional, especially if you're out there on social media or you have your own practice and website, you get approached by many media outlets to say, hey, can we use you as a quote? Can we put your name associated with this article? And they'll pay you money. But then follow that money, right? Where's this article even coming from? Where are they getting the budget to pay this dietitian? And then for them to just throw it all on this dietitian, hey, it's why one dietitian is speaking up for ultra processed food. It adds to the deleterious nature of this article from the get-go. And I have to be honest with that. I mean, just from the way they're changing the title, from what they're saying, from really just this opinion and this point of view. Again, I know context matters, and that's why in the context of where we are, and literally in the section, I don't know if you guys can see it here, but if we look at the top, it's health, diet, and nutrition. What about this article is healthy and nutritious, and it just, all of it kind of puts that kind of taste in your mouth of like, why are we doing this, and why now, right? So it's very interesting. And I think the good of it, though, I would say, is we're having this conversation. The good of it is we can hopefully add that context with our patients. The good is it gives us another reminder, I think, and I hope, where we can remind our patients that you are not a one size fits all. You are an individual, and we need to take an individual approach with you, whether you need some processed foods for your medical nutrition therapy, or you're a 3-year-old child growing up in 2024 America and want to be healthy. This speaks to what we and why we talk about gut health every day, and promoting beans and peas and lentils and nuts and seeds as we are trying to grow these amazing guts, this gut microbiome. And really that is fed, what we know by studies, not by ultra processed foods per se. And that majority of what this article is saying, which is like 80% diet of ultra processed foods, it's actually better nurtured by a majority of whole foods. Not to say you can never eat ultra processed foods, right? So that context is just so important. And had the article been written that way, it wouldn't have probably gotten that much attention. Maybe who would fund an article on whole foods? Maybe the Walnut Council or the Avocado Board, maybe, but likely not. It wouldn't be on one of the big center pieces of time outlets. So it's hard, right? It's hard. They want those clicks. Time is a business. Time wants to make money. And this is very controversial, and it gets them the clicks, right? We're all talking about it. So there's so much there. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, context, individual approach, and really taking the time to hopefully work with someone if you are having symptoms or suffering with diabetes or any other disease, IBS, the list can go on and on. So it's important you're understanding what your needs are.
And we have some people asking about their specific particular needs.
Yeah. Thank you so much for watching this video. We know you're probably getting quite a bit from it. It can be a lot of information, it can be overwhelming, and we totally get that. Dahlia was there not too long ago, suffering with IBS and SIBO-like symptoms. She was hunched over very often, bloating, gas, constipation, diarrhea, skin issues, hormonal issues, the list goes on and on. So we know this. We've been in practice now as registered dietitians for over a decade, and we created our Good Gut SIBO IBS program for you. If you're experiencing IBS, SIBO symptoms, IMO, SIFO, the list goes on and on. If you're like, I'm not really sure what this is, click down below. We have a free assessment for you, and that'll likely lead you to our Good Gut SIBO IBS program, which is chock full of information we wish we had. It's information that we're giving to our patients, so it's all at your fingertips in one package. It's 7+ hours of video. It is dozens and dozens of handouts. It's tailored meal plans and recipes to truly help you get to the root, to truly help you understand what's going on, so you can truly heal with each meal. Check it out down below.
Someone saying, that's why meat is subsidized. Why Why don't they subsidize healthy food instead? Interesting.
Yeah, so back when we're talking about subsidies.
Well, and that's contextual as well. But it brings an interesting point again about subsidies in general. And I know we've mentioned subsidies in the past, but maybe this is a topic that people want to hear more about. I think we could offer an interesting insight as dietitians on subsidies and the Farm Bill and all that goes into that. But yeah, we do know we would love to advocate for a higher percentage of our Farm Bill subsidies going to those who are growing a variety of fruits and vegetables. We do know right now a very large percentage of our Farm Bill subsidies are going to things like beets, sugar cane, corn, and soy. And a majority of that soy is not for human consumption, it's for animal feed. Same with the corn. A lot of that is for animal feed. So not only are they changing the soil environment by monocropping in this way, they are also really funneling our funds that us as taxpayers are paying into for just a very small variety of different things that ultimately will make up at least some of ultra processed foods, ultra refined food. So there's a lot that goes into the Farm Bill.
I love when Dahlia talks Farm Bill. Wow. She fell in love with her more.
That's James' love language. Soil, Farm Bill.
But I don't know. Do you ever look into the Farm Bill, read about the Farm Bill, chat about the Farm Bill with your patients, or is that a topic that's ever crossed your minds at all of what are we subsidizing and what do our tax dollars go toward?
Yeah. I think, isn't it that so that when you're in the grocery store, like you will see like some of like the dairy and meats like in other like more processed foods, they're seem to be cheaper, but you don't realize that you're already paying that in your taxes compared to the organic other type of products that yes, you will see a higher price, but you didn't pay in your taxes for that. So it's like yeah, I've talked about that before of like we don't really see the full picture of what the price is that is displayed in the grocery store. Is it we've already been paying like with taxes, so that's why they were able to decrease it versus the other way around. So yeah, it does come through many times, especially when you start following and you track. It's like, but why? And then you keep asking the why, and then you get more curious, and then you get more, deep into the thing, and then you just follow and follow and follow, and then you just get to the okay.
Yeah, I think there's some variability. There's patients who love to follow the trail and keep asking you questions and they love to dive deep, and there's patients who are just like, and that's a lot of it's like, whoa, what are you talking about? Like that's a little too much, and that's where it just depends on the patient for sure. Everyone's different. And you guys can kind of guess what kind of patient I would be. I'd be like, why? Wait, why? It's always like, why is the question for sure. Very curious. But I'll say, I see some other questions here. I kind of, one, let's see. Hello, I was wondering if there's any healthy drink alternatives you recommend. So this goes to, okay, we're seeing the drinks out there.
We had mini drinks during our dietitian retreat.
Yes,
we were drinking it up.
Drinks, but you're out there in the grocery store. I mean, just the drink aisle is insane. Like there are so many things to drink. What are some of your guys' go-tos or what?
Well, and just before we get into that, I think it's interesting because we like to go to Natural Products Expo every year. And I think people think all these foods in the grocery store, these were well studied and there's, a whole medical expert team and a dietitian. Like I could go make a product and literally sell it at the grocery store if the grocery store would pick up my product. But anyone with an idea can sell a product. They're not regulated just because it's in a grocery store, even if it's a health food store, right? A more posh health food store or one that's geared towards that doesn't mean that it's always health promoting. So I always like to give that context because I think, people assume if I buy it at Trader Joe's, if I buy it at Whole Foods, if I buy it at Erewhon, it is health promoting. And so I always just like to give that context of like, okay.
And then to clarify, it is regulated. However, there are loopholes that make it easy to
I think sanitation is regulated.
Right. Well, and gross, like generally recognized as safe, right? Like there's a whole host of ingredients to pick from to make your own thing, and then you're good to go. That doesn't mean it's been very well studied, especially in combinations. It's true for supplements. It's true for foods. It's
heavy metals and stuff like that. Who knows?
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, other contaminants. Oh my gosh. So yes, it is. It comes back to you as the individual to have that responsibility, right? Of education, of discernment, of discipline, it goes back to your responsibility at the end of the day. But yeah, so that's it. Well, anyway, so yeah, but healthy. So if you were, as experts, as dietitians, if you're in the grocery store, what are some drinks you're getting for you and your family, or any ones you guys want to shout out? Or
I'm really boring in that I like plain water with a little bit of salt and lemon, like I'm very basic. I don't really care about other drinks, to be honest. But if I am going to have a drink, I actually found that I really like Olipop, the ginger lime. I really like that one. And if you can, like, kind of coming back to what Damaris was saying earlier, if you look at the ingredients list, you can actually see like what they're using, and that some of their ingredients are actually kind of gut friendly because they have like the fibers and all of these other things that make this drink maybe a little bit better, But yeah, for me, it's plain water, maybe a little bit of electrolytes. Just very basic.
Oh, sorry. I have another idea. Coconut water, if you want a little bit of extra flavor, but I will say be careful with coconut water because a lot of them add sugar. A nice one is Harmless Harvest coconut water. So with drinks in general, added sugars, look for added sugars in the back. If they're added sugars, they added real sugar. So yeah, that's another idea. And then herbal teas, fruit teas. Don't knock it till you try it, even if it's cold. Some of these like fruit tea flavors, they really hit the spot. When I'm studying fruit teas, yes. Even if they're cold with some lemon, very nice. Hibiscus tea, really nice for blood pressure as well.
Yeah, I was going to say the tea section is where to go. Even like if you want something warm and maybe a little bit heavier, it's about to be fall soon, and many parts of the country is going to get a lot colder. So like a turmeric latte would be something that would be a really nice warm drink alternative, but also really anti-inflammatory as well.
Love it. I got to say, yeah, love Olipop, love Harmless Harvest. But it's funny when you mentioned the teas and the fruit teas and all that. Dahlia one time made a killer hibiscus, like Jamaica. It was with hibiscus and dates. And
I did?
Yeah, it was a while back. We're so busy now. She doesn't make it all the time. But that was so delicious. We're getting the sweetness of the dates and hopefully many of you watching and listening have tried Jamaica or a hibiscus like sweetened drink. What is it in Egypt? In Egypt they have it. What is it?
Karkade.
Karkade. So when we were in Egypt, it was basically like Jamaica, like we have in Mexico, but it was karkade in Egypt, and it was delicious. And so that is amazing.
I've got to go with kombucha.
I knew you were going to go kombucha. With that. That's why I didn't go.
I love kombucha. And I do try to be mindful of added and refined sugar post fermentation, because sometimes some of those kombucha companies add just as much as any other soda or anything else that has added and refined sugar. So I like to go with ones that only add either fruit juice or a little bit of sugar to get the fermentation going, because you do need to feed the SCOBY for get that fermentation process going. But then after that, really only sweetening with I like the ginger flavor. It's just pure ginger juice added to the kombucha. So that's my favorite beverage.
I love it. Look at this. We got Tracy is saying, I'm drinking hibiscus tea now. Yeah, hibiscus is great.
And
so
Judy's asking for a recipe for hibiscus and date. I've gotta experiment.
Can you share the recipe? Yeah, it's been a while, but we need to bring that. Yeah, we need to make that a recipe and add it to the program, add it to our.
So affordable too.
Yeah.
That would be a really affordable recipe. And our last question, interestingly, I've not read this report, so I don't know that I could speak to it, but Judy's asking, what do you think about the reported benefit of olive oil? I'm aware of the crossover study reported by PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, comparing people following a Mediterranean diet with 4 tablespoons of olive oil a day with those who are not consuming olive oil. However, no one discussed using a lesser amount of olive oil, such as 1 tablespoon or less. I just very briefly looked over their study. I have not read this study. But it seems like they compared people on a plant-based diet. They had people who were eating 4 tablespoons a day versus they just said lower fat. And they found that, of course, those who were not eating as much oil lost weight because 4 tablespoons of oil is quite calorie dense. But they also saw a change in their LDL cholesterol. I don't know the amount, again, because I haven't read the study. But yeah, I know that per the Predimed study, we know that there are benefits to adding olive oil to the diet. Most cardiovascular disease markers decreased with the presence of extra virgin olive oil in the diet. Whether the amounts, I would say, would probably differ person to person based on their caloric needs and their very specific predisposition, just genetically, and their lifestyle, their diet, their exercise.
Yeah, and ultimately, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and also like quality matters when it comes to these type of oils and how it's packaged. You know, oils can get rancid very easily and get like really influenced by heat and light and all of this stuff. So it's really important that when you're choosing olive oil, that you make sure that perhaps it's organic, you know, as if the budget allows, if you can do it, to go for quality and making sure that the bottle is glass and dark so that it protects the oil and so that it stays fresh and has all of the nutrients whenever you're going to consume them.
Yes. Just two quick things on olive oil as well, just to consider, what is it replacing? Because if it's replacing non-healthy or fat, it's a great idea. But also olive oil, you just don't want to fry with it. You don't want to heat it too much. It's excellent for like drizzling at the end of a meal.
And I just looked quickly over the abstract. I guess the study had 40 participants. One group had 48% fat intake comprised of 48% of their diet, another group 32% of their diet. So a moderately high fat versus kind of a moderate fat intake. Both diets resulted in comparable reductions in LDL cholesterol, total cholesterol, apolipoprotein B, high density lipoprotein cholesterol, glucose, and high sensitivity C-reactive protein, so an inflammatory cardiovascular inflammatory marker. So overall, there seems to be benefits regardless, but the amount would probably differ per person.
Yeah, and to what Damar said, I mean, it's realizing oil is a processed food, right? And so just like
that second category.
In the second category, right? But at the end of the day, it's a great just using logic and using, again, to what your needs are. It's the same thing of eating oranges versus drinking orange juice, eating apples versus drinking apple juice. It's eating olives versus olive oil, and understanding that in order to get that caloric amount in these juices or oils, even protein powders, when we're refining protein and then eating that protein, in order to get that in the whole food amount, you'd have to eat many oranges, many apples, many olives, right? And so it is being mindful of like, okay, how much of this am I using? What am I using it for? What are my goals and objectives? And so again, it's a lot of your personal wants and needs and intentions in that. And so just being very mindful. So if I could say personally, yeah, olive oil, we use it very little, very sparingly. We're not going crazy with it. It's just, it's very much at the end of our overall list of things we eat. And when it comes to ultra processed foods, we eat ultra processed foods. Shocker. What comes to mind is some of the little Siete chips, if you guys are familiar with the brand Siete, and we eat those, and those would be ultra processed foods. And we eat that. We have that with some guacamole. Does that make up a majority of our diet? Absolutely not. It's a very, very much a minority. And so
we'd love to hear everyone's closing thoughts and closing statements on what you as dietitians think about including ultra processed foods as a majority of calories, since that's what this article is about.
Yeah.
I was just going to add before, just very quickly, that also to kind of highlight that, you're eating the ultra processed with an avocado and a guacamole, right? Which in the pool of things, once you're consuming the thing, it's not just the ultra processed. You're also adding the fiber from the avocado. You're also adding some of the vitamins and minerals that come with the whole fruit. So at the end, it's like, yes, there's ultra processed, but you're also can pair it with other food. It's not like you just because you have ultra processed, you just have to eat it plain like that. No, you can add fruits, you can add anything. Others you can just combine, mix and match, and make it upgrade the ultra processed food in a way.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think my biggest takeaway from this article, and I'm going to share a little quote from what was mentioned in the article, that when eating the ultra processed foods, they felt better from eating more calories, eating full meals instead of haphazardly putting combinations of whole foods together. And I think that word haphazard was a very specific word choice, in that we need to bring mindfulness back to our food choices, whether it's being mindful about making an ultra processed food choice in a certain situation versus a whole food choice in a different situation, and bringing that mindfulness back to balance, building that balanced meal, that balanced plate, not just haphazardly throwing foods on the plate and calling it a day. Really making mindful, educated choices when it comes to your meals is of the utmost importance.
Yeah, I would also say that I would encourage you to ask yourself 3 questions. I would say, first of all, what is my goal? What is this food replacing? And what am I doing most days? Because ultra processed, every meal most days is definitely not the way to go. And we tend to eat with our tongues, with our hearts, what pleases the eye, what pleases our tongue. But sometimes we need a little bit of wisdom to figure out, is this actually what I want? Like maybe in this moment it might taste well, but maybe like a year from now, when I visit the doctor or when I want to go play with my kids or when I'm trying to out for a competition, is this something that I appreciated doing? Or is this something that I think I would also learn to enjoy some other food? So yeah.
Love it.
And I just want to end with one of my favorite quotes. I think one book that really just solidified my love for nutrition early on in my nutrition education was Michael Pollan's In Defense of Food. If you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. They even have a kids version of it. But, his takeaway after really exploring the depths of ultra refined food and, farm to table food was eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And so that affords room for ultra processed foods in there, right? It's not all plants, it's mostly plants. Try to eat the least processed food as possible, while certainly not haphazardly just putting it together. Mindfully eat it, really understand your goals and your needs, so that way you're not saying, well, I tried eating mostly whole foods, but I was still hungry and I didn't have enough energy. So really know what you need. Yeah, continue to eat those foods, eat them mindfully, and don't feel guilty if you have some ultra processed foods here and there, but I certainly wouldn't agree that it has a place for a majority in the.
I love it. It's so easy for us to talk with our team. We love these discussions and topics. If you guys ever want us to discuss a topic, please feel free to reach out at marriedhealth.com, or you can put it in the comments down below wherever you're watching. And again, the benefit of watching Good Gut Live, or the benefit of subscribing to our email at marriedhealth.com or following us, is that you get to join the Good Gut live and ask questions. So the questions at the end are coming from members, patients, our community joining the live and asking questions. If you're listening to this later, Spotify, Apple, you'll find us anywhere podcasts are found. We thank you all so much for watching and listening and participating, and we'll see you all very soon for another Good Gut Live. And as always,
feel with each meal. And we hope that you also feel with each meal.
And if you want to learn more about our incredible team, marytouth.com, and you'll get to learn about and even work with Katie, Damaris, Laura, as well as Maggie very soon. And who am I forgetting? Rachel. Can't forget Rachel, which is the rest of our amazing team.
Yes.
So
someone was asking, who else is on this live? These are amazing dietitians at Married to Health. So you can read all about them, see what their niches, their passions, their specialties are all about.
All right, everybody. Until next time, thank you all.